Hey, it's NPR's Book of the Day. I'm Andrew Limbaugh. Before we get into today's show, I want to tell you about a new offering we have here at Book of the Day. We have now launched Book of the Day Plus, which is a new way to support our work here at NPR. When you sign up, you get access to a special feed where you can listen to our new episodes sponsor-free. Nothing is changing about our regular show, but Book of the Day Plus is another way to help us keep giving you the books coverage you love. So please do sign up. We really appreciate it. You can find out more at plus.npr.org/bookoftheday. All right, on to today's show. Communicating across language barriers is a difficult thing. But when it happens, when two people who don't speak the same language can really reach a point of communication, that's a beautiful thing. In Carys Davies' novel, Clear, an 1800s Scottish reverend heads to a remote island and encounters the last man who speaks Norn, a real-life extinct language that Davies came across in a library one night. About halfway through this interview with NPR Scott Simon, Davies reads an excerpt that's part English and part Norn, and it's fascinating how I almost feel like I get what she's saying, even if I don't understand most of it. That's after the break.
This message comes from NPR sponsor HBO. From executive producers Park Chan-wook and Robert Downey Jr., The Sympathizer is the new HBO original limited series based on the Pulitzer Prize-winning novel. On the Sympathizer podcast, host Philip Wynn joins the cast, crew, and author Viet Thanh Nguyen to discuss the making of this historic series. Stream new episodes of HBO's The Sympathizer Sundays exclusively on Max, and listen to the Sympathizer podcast wherever you listen to podcasts.
The Reverend John Ferguson has broken away from the Church of Scotland to help found a new faith in 1843, but he needs to keep body and soul together for himself and his wife, Mary Ferguson. So he agrees to take on what we'd now call a gig, to sail to a small island to tell its lone inhabitant that he's being evicted. But John Ferguson arrives and falls from a high cliff. He's found by Ivar, who's been living a solitary life alongside his animals with no human contact in any way, as he helps bring the Reverend Ferguson, the man who was going to evict him, back to life. The two men begin to know one another and develop their own distinct language. Clear is the new novel from Carys Davies, the Welsh-born novelist who's recipient of the Royal Society of Literature's V.S. Pritchett Prize, and she now resides in Edinburgh. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks very much for having me.
These two men are profoundly different, aren't they?
They certainly are. One of them is an educated Presbyterian minister, and Ivar, as you say, has been living alone on a remote island off the far northeast coast of Scotland. The remains of his family, his grandmother, his mother, and his brother's widow, left about 20 years ago for the New World. They'd given up on life on the island, but Ivar just couldn't bring himself to go. He couldn't imagine any other kind of life.
Tell us about this period called the Clearances in the 1840s. I must say it was a revelation to me.
So we're in the 1840s now. So these are the last most brutally coercive years of the clearances, which have been going on since the middle of the previous century. Scottish landowners began clearing their estates of poor, unprofitable tenants and replacing them with sheep. And this sheep frontier, if you like, has been moving gradually further and further north as the landowners seek to make more money out of their estates than they can with their poorer, smaller tenants.
John Ferguson's wife, Mary Ferguson, has doubts about her husband's mission, doesn't she?
She does. She is the thing you should know about John Ferguson is that as a Presbyterian minister, he is politically and socially very conservative. He respects the right of landowners to do as they will with their properties. Mary has a much more, I suppose, human and compassionate view, and she's very skeptical of the economists' view that these so-called improvements to the land are good for the people.
How did John and Ivar begin to communicate?
Very slowly. They begin by Ivar pointing at things, wildly gesticulating, and John writing down the names of objects, the names of animals, the names of colors. The words Ivar has in his language are so many and so specific for very slightly differentiated things, like, a cloud with a bit of light shining on the top is a different word from a cloud with a bit of light shining underneath. And over a period of about a month, they begin to communicate in a sort of pidgin way, but with a certain amount of depth here and there.
I want to get you to read a section, if you could, please. It might give us some idea of what begins to sound almost like a dialogue between the two people, the two men who don't understand each other.
Still heavily padded with English, the whole thing was an excited mixture of speech and gestures in which John Ferguson told him how he'd been down to the O to wash his socks, or that he'd stayed inside because it was gruggy out, or that he'd filled the lamp from the bunkie and cleaned out the grurt, that he'd had a quick flinter around, swept up the flogs of sniag and brought in the skerpin, or that he'd picked some snorri he'd found growing in the fore, scalded the flodrecks and drained them and saved the flingersaw to make soup. And for a little while now had been sitting in the tour, going through everything he'd written down so far on the pages of his glossary.
How did you develop that language?
This whole novel began one winter's night about 12 years ago. I'd been working in the lovely old reading room in the National Library of Scotland in Edinburgh and came across a dictionary in an extinct language I'd never heard of before, Norn, which I discovered had once been spoken on the islands of Orkney and Shetland off the far north coast of Scotland. For about a decade, I kept going back to this dictionary and reading it until a picture began to emerge of an island and a man who I realized was the last speaker of this vanishing language.
What do you think Ivar and John begin to see in one another?
It's mysterious. I'm not sure I can give you logical reasons. It's a bond that they form because they're alone. I'm always drawn to putting my characters in quite remote, desolate places, and it sounds a little harsh, perhaps, that I like to put them in these sorts of places, but I do think it means that the distractions of everyday life fall away in these sorts of situations. And, as humans, we're very good at not confronting things that we don't want to confront.
Carys Davies, her new novel, Clear. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Do you ever wish you could get your stories in 3 hours rather than 3 minutes? Or maybe you're sick of doom scrolling, getting your news in bits and pieces. That is where Embedded comes in. We bring you documentary series that will change the way you think about things. Find us wherever you get your podcasts.
Support for NPR and the following message come from IXL Online. Is your child asking questions on their homework you don't feel equipped to answer? IXL Learning uses advanced algorithms to give the right help to each kid, no matter the age or personality. One subscription gets you everything. One site for all the kids in your home, pre-K to 12th grade. Make an impact on your child's learning. Get IXL now. And NPR listeners can get an exclusive 20% off IXL membership when they sign up today at IXL.com/NPR. This message comes from NPR sponsor Mint Mobile. From the gas pump to the grocery store, inflation is everywhere. So Mint Mobile is offering premium wireless starting at just $15 a month. To get your new phone plan for just $15, go to mintmobile.com/switch.